My son looked me straight in the eyes, slid the dinner check across the table, and said, "Come on, Dad. You've got the pension. You can cover it." The whole table went quiet. My grandson stared down at his plate. A couple sitting nearby glanced over. I could have argued. I could have reminded my son how many birthdays I'd worked through just to give him the life he had. But I didn't. I simply smiled and reached for the check. That's when the restaurant owner stopped walking. He looked directly at me, and his face suddenly changed. Then he said 5 words that made my son's smile disappear. "Arthur Bennett. Is that really you?" "My name is Arthur Bennett. I'm 73 years old. For 47 years, I worked on the railroad. Most people never think about the men who keep the trains moving. That's okay. We weren't looking for applause. We just showed up, did our jobs, and went home to our families. Started when I was 21. Back then, my hands were strong. My back didn't ache every morning, and my wife, Carol, used to wait for me on the front porch with 2 cups of coffee. She'd hear my old pickup pulling into the driveway, walk outside, smile. And somehow, the longest day always felt a little shorter. Life wasn't perfect. Money was tight. There were months when every dollar already had a purpose before my paycheck even arrived. But we never complained. We had each other, and for us that was enough. Then Jason was born. The first time I held him, I made myself a promise. He would never have to struggle the way I did. If that meant overtime, I'd work overtime. If that meant missing a birthday, I'd miss it. If that meant coming home after midnight with sore feet and grease on my hands, so be it. That's what fathers do, or at least, that's what I believed. Years passed faster than I ever imagined. Jason grew into a smart young man. College, a good career, a beautiful wife named Emily, 2 wonderful kids, Ben and little Megan. Watching my grandchildren grow became the best part of getting older. After Carol passed away 5 years ago, they became the reason I kept moving forward. The house felt quieter without her. Too quiet. Some evenings, I'd still catch myself setting out 2 coffee mugs before realizing one of them wasn't needed anymore. Grief has a strange way of sneaking into ordinary moments. You never really get over it. You just learn to carry it a little better. 3 days before my birthday, my phone rang. The screen said Jason. I smiled before answering. "Hey, Dad. You busy Friday night?" I laughed. At my age, Friday looks about the same as Monday. He chuckled. "Emily wants to take you out for your birthday." For a second I didn't answer, not because I wasn't happy, because it had been months since we'd all gone out together. "That sounds nice. I'll pick you up around 6. No arguments. You got it." After we hung up, I looked over at Carol's empty rocking chair by the window, smiled to myself. Looks like they're finally making time for the old man. For the first time in weeks, I was actually looking forward to Friday. Friday evening arrived faster than I expected. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, straightened my collar, and brushed a little dust off my old brown jacket. It wasn't expensive, never had been, but Carol used to say, "You don't need fancy clothes to look respectable. You just need to wear them with pride." I smiled. Still giving me advice, huh? Right on time, Jason's black SUV pulled into my driveway. Ben jumped out before the engine was even off. "Grandpa!" He wrapped his arms around me. I laughed. "Easy there, buddy. You keep hugging me like that, and you'll crack an old man's ribs." Ben grinned. "Worth it." Emily smiled politely as I climbed into the back seat beside my granddaughter Megan. "Happy birthday, Arthur," she said. "Thanks, Emily." Jason looked at me through the rearview mirror. "You ready?" "I've been ready all day." He smiled, or at least I thought he did. 25 minutes later, we pulled into the parking lot of the Oakenstone Steakhouse. I'd driven past the place dozens of times over the years. White stone walls, large glass windows, soft lights glowing inside. It wasn't the kind of restaurant Carol and I could afford when we were raising Jason. Back then, every extra dollar went toward mortgage payments, school supplies, or saving for college. Funny how life works. Now I could afford to eat there. But the one person I wanted beside me was gone. A young hostess greeted us with a warm smile. "Good evening." "Reservation for Hayes," Jason said confidently. She checked her tablet. "Right this way." As we walked through the dining room, I noticed families celebrating birthdays, older couples holding hands, friends laughing over dinner. For a moment, it reminded me of the nights Carol and I used to dream about. "One day," she'd say, "when Jason's grown and on his own, we'll come somewhere like this." Swallowed the lump in my throat. Some dreams arrive too late. Our table sat beside a large window overlooking downtown Lexington. The city lights sparkled against the evening sky. Ben leaned over. "Grandpa, this place is awesome." "It sure is, buddy." The waitress introduced herself. "My name's Rachel. I'll be taking care of you tonight." She handed everyone a menu. I glanced at mine, then quietly closed it. Not because I couldn't afford the prices, because after 47 years of eating diner food and homemade meals, a 16-ounce steak didn't impress me nearly as much as good company. Jason noticed. "You okay, Dad?" I smiled. "I'm just deciding." Rachel laughed softly. "Take your time. We're in no rush." For the next 20 minutes, everything felt normal. We talked about Ben's baseball season. Megan told us she'd finally passed her driving test. Emily shared pictures from their recent vacation in Florida. I mostly listened. I always enjoyed hearing everyone talk. Sometimes the happiest moments are the quiet ones. Then Ben looked at me. "Grandpa, can we go fishing again this summer?" Before I could answer, Jason interrupted. "We'll see. Dad's getting older. I'm not sure he can keep up anymore." Everyone laughed, including me. It sounded like a harmless joke. But something about the way Jason said it stayed with me. I wasn't offended, just a little surprised. And deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight wasn't going to end the way I'd hoped. Dinner arrived a few minutes later. The smell of grilled steak filled the air. Ben couldn't wait to dig in. "Grandpa, you have to try this mashed potato." I smiled. I was planning on it. For a while, everything felt almost perfect. We laughed, shared stories. Even Emily seemed more relaxed than usual. I caught myself thinking, maybe I've been worrying too much. Maybe tonight really was just about family. Then Jason raised his glass. I want to make a toast. Everyone looked at him. To Dad. For always working hard, for always providing, and for finally enjoying retirement. We all lifted our glasses. To Dad. Smiled. Thank you. For a brief moment, I felt appreciated. Maybe this birthday really was different. About 20 minutes later, Rachel, our waitress, returned with a small black leather folder. Without saying a word, she placed it gently on the table, right in front of me. At first, I thought she'd made a mistake. I glanced toward Jason. He didn't move. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and smiled. Then he said, loud enough for the next table to hear, "Come on, Dad, you've got the pension now." A couple at the next table looked over. Jason chuckled. "Besides, you always told me a real man pays the bill." Emily let out a nervous laugh. "I told him you'd think it was funny." Ben stopped eating. Megan slowly looked down at her plate. I felt every eye at the table drift toward me. For a second, nobody spoke. I looked at the check. Then at my son. It wasn't the money. I could afford dinner. That wasn't the point. It was the way he'd done it. The joke, the timing, the audience. I remembered something Carol used to say. "Arthur, people rarely remember what you spent. They always remember how you made them feel." I took a slow sip of my coffee, set the cup back on the table, and smiled. Well, I suppose a birthday can still surprise an old man. Jason laughed again. "That's the spirit, Dad." Reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my wallet, opened it, and quietly looked at the bill. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone standing near the front of the dining room, an older gentleman in a dark suit. He wasn't looking at the guests. He was looking at me. His expression changed. He took one step forward, then another. He handed a folder to one of the managers without taking his eyes off our table. As he got closer, something about his face felt familiar. I just couldn't place it. He stopped beside our table, looked directly at me, then a slow smile spread across his face. He spoke so quietly, only I heard the first words. "Arthur Bennett." He paused, shook his head in disbelief. "I never thought I'd see you again." I looked at him carefully. The voice, the eyes. Then it hit me. "Frank?" He smiled. "You haven't changed as much as you think." Jason looked confused. "You two know each other." Frank glanced at him, then back at me. A look of genuine respect crossed his face. He pulled out an empty chair, sat down beside me and said, "Son, do you have any idea who your father really is?" For a moment, neither of us spoke. Frank smiled, then reached out and shook my hand with both of his. "I'll be darned. I've been looking at your face for 30 seconds, hoping I wasn't mistaken." I laughed softly. "It's been a long time." Jason looked from me to Frank. "Dad, who's this?" Frank looked at him with a surprised expression. "You mean he never told you?" Jason frowned. "Told me what?" Frank pulled up a chair. "If you folks don't mind, I'd like to borrow your father for just a minute." I looked at Jason. "You mind?" He forced a smile. "Sure, go ahead." Frank gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "This way." As we walked toward the back office, he quietly said, "You haven't changed, Arthur." I've just gotten slower. He laughed. So have I. The office wasn't fancy. A wooden desk, old photographs on the wall. One of them caught my attention immediately. A black and white picture of two young railroad workers standing beside a freight train. I smiled. I remember that day. Frank nodded. So do I. He poured 2 cups of coffee. Just plain black coffee, exactly how we used to drink it. You still don't take sugar? Nope. Some habits never leave. Frank leaned back in his chair. You remember the winter of '82? I nodded immediately. Hard to forget. The tracks froze. The freight train near Ashland. Frank smiled sadly. I was the new guy. I panicked. I made a mistake. I knew exactly what he meant. A mechanical failure had nearly caused a serious accident. Frank had been terrified he'd lose his job. I'll never forget what you did. Shook my head. I didn't do anything special. Frank smiled. No, you took the blame with me. You stayed all night helping fix the problem. You told the supervisor, if Frank goes, I go too. You saved my career. I looked down at my coffee. Back then, it hadn't felt like a sacrifice. It just felt like the right thing to do. Frank looked at me. Everything I have today, my business, my family, this restaurant, it all started because someone believed I deserved a second chance. He paused. That someone was you. Back in the dining room, Jason kept checking his watch. Emily whispered, What are they talking about? I have no idea. Ben quietly looked toward the office door. I think Grandpa knows him. Megan nodded. I've never seen Grandpa smile like that. Frank stood up. Arthur, I'd like to do something. I smiled. You don't owe me anything. He shook his head. No, I've owed you for 40 years. But this isn't about paying you back. It's about honoring a good man. I frowned. What do you mean? Frank smiled. Come with me. He opened the office door. The dining room became quiet again as we walked back toward the table. Frank stopped beside Jason, looked him politely in the eye, then said something that made the entire table fall silent. Young man, your father spent his whole life making sure other people never carried burdens alone. Tonight, you handed him one in front of the people he loves most. The smile disappeared from Jason's face. Emily slowly lowered her eyes. Ben stopped eating completely. The restaurant had gone so quiet, you could hear glasses being set on tables. Frank wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. His voice stayed calm, but every word carried weight. I've met thousands of customers over the years. Very few men leave a legacy of kindness. Your father did. Don't ever mistake quiet for weakness. I didn't say a word, because for the first time that evening, I didn't need to. Nobody at our table moved. Jason looked embarrassed. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Frank rested one hand on the back of my chair. His voice remained calm. I've owned this restaurant for 18 years. I've served judges, doctors, professional athletes, even politicians. He looked around the dining room. But I've only met a handful of people whose character impressed me more than their success. Then he looked directly at Jason. Your father is one of them. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I was just joking. Frank nodded slowly. I figured that's what you'd say. But let me ask you something. He pointed toward me. When was the last time you invited your father to dinner? Jason didn't answer. Frank continued. When was the last time you called him just to ask how he was doing? Still no answer. When was the last time your children saw? You thank the man who worked nearly 50 years to give you the life you have today. The silence felt heavy. Ben slowly looked at his dad. I'd never seen my grandson so quiet. Frank turned to me. Arthur, I still remember what you told me the night we finished repairing that freight line. Smiled faintly. I said a lot of things back then. He chuckled. You said, a man's paycheck feeds his family, but his character feeds his name. I stared at him. I'd completely forgotten saying that. Frank smiled. I never did. He looked back at Jason. Your father gave me that lesson over 40 years ago. I've tried to live by it ever since. Rachel, our waitress, quietly walked over. Mr. Hayes. She looked at me with a warm smile. I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. Thank you. She hesitated. My father worked on the railroad too. He retired last year. I hope he grows old with the same dignity you have. I smiled. Take good care of him. I plan to. She walked away. Jason watched the whole exchange without saying a word. I finally picked up the leather folder containing the check. I opened it, reached for my wallet. Frank gently placed his hand over mine. No. I looked up. He smiled. Not tonight. I frowned. You know I can pay. I know you can. That's not why. He paused. 42 years ago, you bought me lunch every Friday for almost 3 months. I couldn't afford it. You never let me feel embarrassed. You just said, pay it forward someday. He smiled. I've been waiting 42 years to do exactly that. I couldn't help but laugh. You've got a better memory than I do. My wife says the same thing. For the first time all evening, the table relaxed. Even Ben smiled. Jason slowly stood. His chair scraped against the floor. He looked at me. Not at Frank, not at Emily. Just me. Dad. His voice cracked. Sorry. I thought. He stopped, then shook his head. No, I wasn't thinking at all. I wanted everyone to laugh. I never stopped to think how it would make you feel. The restaurant had become busy again. People returned to their own conversations. But at our table, time seemed to stand still. Jason looked down at the floor. I embarrassed the one person who never embarrassed me. He swallowed hard. I'm ashamed of that. I stood up, walked over to my son, placed one hand on his shoulder, and quietly said, Son, growing older teaches you something. People make mistakes. The important part is what they choose to do after they realize it. Jason looked up at me. His eyes were full of tears. I'll do better. I nodded. I know you will. Then I hugged him. Not because he'd earned forgiveness in one night, but because I didn't want pride to become another mistake our family carried. The drive home was quiet. Jason insisted on taking me back himself. Emily and the kids followed in their own car. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the tires rolling across the highway. Finally, Jason cleared his throat. Dad, I've been thinking. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. That's usually a good place to start. He let out a small laugh, the kind people make when they're nervous. I don't know when I started treating you like... He stopped. Like you were just there. I looked out the window. The street lights blurred past. You didn't do it overnight. He frowned. What do you mean? It happened slowly. One missed phone call. One cancelled visit. One holiday you don't think to invite your old man to. Until one day, you don't notice what you've become. Jason gripped the steering wheel tighter. I hate hearing that. I know, but sometimes the truth hurts because it matters. When we reached my house, Jason turned off the engine. Neither of us moved. He looked at the old porch. I haven't been here in months. Smiled. I noticed. He looked ashamed. I'm sorry. I know. He looked at me. No, I mean really sorry. You spent your whole life showing up for me. And somewhere along the way, I stopped showing up for you. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to wait by the front window every evening, watching for my old pickup truck after work. Reached over and squeezed his shoulder. You still have time to fix that. Just then, another car pulled into the driveway. Ben jumped out before it even stopped. Grandpa! He ran toward me holding something behind his back. I made this for you. He handed me a folded birthday card. The front read, "To the best grandpa ever." Inside, in messy 12-year-old handwriting, it said, Grandpa, thanks for teaching me how to fish, how to fix things, and how to keep my promises. Dad says he wants to be more like you. I do too. Love, Ben. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Not because it was perfect, because someday, when my memory wasn't what it used to be, I wanted those words close to my heart. Emily walked over quietly. Arthur, I owe you an apology too. You warned us years ago that respect isn't something children automatically learn. It's something they watch. She glanced toward Jason. I forgot they were watching us. He nodded. They're always watching. Ben looked confused. What does that mean? I smiled. It means if your dad treats his father with kindness, one day you'll probably treat your dad the same way. Ben thought about that. Then he quietly reached over and took his father's hand. Jason's eyes filled with tears. A week later, there was another knock at my door. This time it wasn't a birthday. It wasn't a holiday. It was just Jason, holding 2 fishing rods. He smiled awkwardly. Thought maybe we could waste a Saturday together. I laughed. I thought that's exactly what Saturdays were made for. We spent the entire morning at the lake. We didn't talk much. We didn't have to. Some relationships aren't repaired by long speeches. Sometimes they're repaired by simply showing up. Again, and again, and again. As the sun began to set, Jason looked across the water. You know, I almost ruined the best relationship in my life over one stupid joke. Smiled. It wasn't the joke. It was forgetting who was sitting across from you. He nodded slowly. I won't forget again. I believed him, not because he said the right words, because for the first time in a long while, his actions finally matched them. I still have that birthday card. It's tucked inside the same Bible Carol gave me on our 25th anniversary. Every now and then, I read it again, not to remember the painful dinner, but to remember what came after. Because families aren't held together by perfect moments. They're held together by humble hearts, honest apologies, and people who choose to love each other even after they've been hurt. And if there's one thing 47 years on the railroad taught me, it's this. The strongest tracks aren't the ones that never crack. They're the ones people care enough to repair. The end